Okay, so we have been focusing on archetypal theory. What that means is that as we are reading through the story of Snow White, we're going to be focusing on different archetypes. In the last activity that you did, you played a matching game, and that exposed you to some of the archetypes that we're going to see. There are more, and you may need to do some independent research. What I recommend doing is, one, reading through the story of Snow White on your own, like not looking for anything, just kind of taking the story in, and then going back and paying attention to archetypes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the first page or so of the story and kind of show you what it is I'm expecting you to do for this activity, because essentially you're going to be annotating. And I'm going to kind of show you what exactly that means. So, I'm going to change this to blue. As I start reading, it starts off once upon a time in midwinter. If we think back to the archetypal activity that we did the other day, right, or in your last lesson, winter is weather, okay? And so let's think about what midwinter could represent. If you remember, winter means death. So midwinter probably means the same thing. If we continue on, we then have when the snowflakes were falling like feathers from heaven. Snow, right, and snowflakes are white, which means they're usually pure, and they can oftentimes mean like hiding or kind of like preparing to be reborn. Then if I continue on, a queen sat sewing at her window, which had a frame of black ebony wood. If you remember, I believe black means mystery or mysterious. As she sewed, she looked up at the snow, again, snow, purity, and pricked her finger with her needle. Believe it or not, numbers can also be archetypes. The number 3 is super important, right? Think about Catholicism. We have the Holy Trinity. Okay, and that is done on purpose. The Grimm brothers actually grew up in a very religious household. So oftentimes their stories have a ton of biblical references inside of them. So we have our 3 drops of blood which fell into the snow. If we have red, that represented love, anger, violence. Okay, red is kind of an all-encompassing color. And again, we have white, just like the snow, pure. If only I had a child that was as white as snow, red as blood, and black as the wood in this frame. Because we've already talked about the meaning of white, red, and black, I don't need to circle them again. So then we continue on. Soon afterwards, she had a little daughter who was as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as ebony wood, and therefore they called her Little Snow White. And as soon as the child was born, the queen died. So this kind of pairs up with our reading from before, right? Midwinter, snowflakes, covering death, etc. It all ties together. A year later, the king took himself another wife. She was a beautiful woman, but she was proud and arrogant, and she could not stand it if anyone might surpass her in beauty. She had a magic mirror. Every morning she stood before it, looked at herself, and said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all?" As a quick sidebar, just to make sure we're all on the same page, the word fair in this story means beautiful. To this the mirror answered, "You, my queen, are fairest of all." Then she was satisfied, for she knew that the mirror spoke the truth. Snow White grew up and became ever more beautiful. When she was 7 years old, she was as beautiful as the light of day, even more beautiful than the queen herself. The number 7 also has biblical allusions, but it is I don't know how else to put this, but it's a perfect number. It's a prime number, and in general, it just kind of represents perfection. It is like a very safe, very spiritual number. Like the number 7 is chosen intentionally. One day, when the queen asked her mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all?" it answered, "You, my queen, are fair, it's true, but Snow White is 1,000 times fairer than you." The queen took fright and turned yellow and green with envy. In our archetype activity, it said that yellow represented happiness, and that is very true. Yellow, however, can also represent danger, right? Think about animals in the wild. The dangerous ones usually have very bright markings, red and yellow markings. Green can not only represent fertility, but it can also represent sickness and jealousy. From that hour on, whenever she looked at Snow White, her heart turned over inside her body, so great was her hatred for the girl. The envy and pride grew ever greater, like a weed in her heart, until she had no peace day and night. In this instance, right, a weed is something that is, what's the right word? All-encompassing, right? A weed is very hard to get rid of. It's stubborn. It keeps coming back. And it's not good, right? It kills whatever it touches. Then she summoned a huntsman and said to him, "Take Snow White out into the woods. I never want to see her again. Kill her, and as proof that she is dead, bring her lungs and her liver back to me." Okay? Lungs, right, represent breathing air. And the liver honestly has a lot of ties to Greek mythology. Off the top of my head, I can't remember what liver represents, so that might be a good thing for you to look up. Additionally, we have the woods, which represents like hiding, but also, once in the woods, trees, and that can represent life. The huntsman obeyed and took Snow White into the woods. He took out his hunting knife and was about to stab it into her innocent heart when she began to cry, saying, "Oh, dear huntsman, let me live. I will run into the wild woods and never look back." "Run away, you poor child," blah, blah, blah. Okay. So, you kind of have a little idea as to what it is I'm looking for. I want you to continue reading through this story, paying attention to things like characters, numbers, weather, clothing, what else? Did I already say colors? Animals, plants. There is a ton of information and a ton of archetypes. If you've already highlighted one, right? Like we don't need to circle every time snow is used. We got that one down. You don't need to repeat yourself. However, I do expect you to annotate the entire story. There should be at least some annotations on every page. And